As movies become more and more reliant on computer effects, the entire landscape of filmmaking is changing. And sometimes there aren't any landscapes at all, because it's all done in front of a green screen. The end result? Movie sets look completely ridiculous. Here's a behind-the-scenes look at what some of your favorite movies looked like before the special effects team went to work. The Planet of the Apes. Effects studio Weta Digital changed the game when they helped reboot Planet of the Apes with a new trilogy of prequels beginning with 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Producer Dylan Clark had a special amount of praise for Andy Serkis, the industry's top performance capture artist shown as protagonist Caesar, redefining screen acting in the digital age.
Andy Serkis is unlike any other actor. He can inhabit characters that don't speak and emote in ways that you don't really see often.
Fox campaigned for Serkis to get an Oscar nomination, but the call from the Academy never came, much to the actor's frustration. After the release of 2017's War of the Planet of the Apes, Serkis told Independent, "The awarding bodies should not discriminate about this being different. The visual effects render the character just like putting on makeup, except here it happens after the fact. It's digital makeup, if you will." Harry Potter. Bringing J.K. Rowling's wizarding world to life was only ever going to be possible with the help of CGI, and the films made increasingly good use of visual effects with each installment. While early CGI hasn't aged well, the quality of digital imagery from Goblet of Fire onward still holds up. The VFX team had to up their game for the fourth film in the series, as it marked the return of Lord Voldemort. Paul Franklin, the VFX supervisor for Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, revealed that creating Voldemort's nose was a mammoth task. Franklin told Radio Times, "There's this idea that we put the shots through the computer and it just vanished off his face. His nose had to be painstakingly edited out, frame by frame, over the whole film. And then the snake slits had to be added and tracked very carefully using dots put on his face for reference. That's a lot of work for a couple nose slits, but Voldemort just wouldn't have been the same without them."
He's a great looking nose! Great nose! Wonderful nose!
Thanks for the new wand, Mr. Ollivander!
Nothing's too good for James Potter.
Life of Pi. Filming this tale of a boy stranded at sea with a Bengal tiger came with a number of obstacles, but the biggest one wasn't the tiger, it was the water. Director Ang Lee explained, "I knew that to make it work with 3D, water had to become a character itself. I've never seen realistic water scenes in movies because water hits one side of a tank wall and bounces back like it would in a bathtub, but we needed to make it work. That's not to say the tiger was easy to create either. Scenes in which Pi interacts with the deadly animal were done using a crude puppet. The rest of it had to come from CGI. Game of Thrones. The season finales on Game of Thrones always have a cinematic quality, thanks in part to the digital wizardry of Pixomondo. Green screen use is kept to a minimum where possible, but bringing the creatures of George R.R. Martin's world into the mix requires some top-notch CGI. Pixomondo's VFX supervisor Sven Martin told The Washington Post that one of their biggest achievements has been making Daenerys' dragons blend seamlessly with the world around them. But all that magic doesn't happen until the dragon scenes have been shot, so how does Emilia Clarke connect with her fire-breathing babies? Green puppets. The actress told Huffington Post, "They have these amazing life-scale models that we use for camera rehearsals for the sake of the CGI people, and I got very attached to them. Fundamentally, they're dolls, I suppose, but it was nice to have something physical that I could really picture in my mind." Alice in Wonderland. Tim Burton was creating stunning visual effects long before relying heavily on CGI, using a combination of practical techniques to bring his vision to the screen. The former Disney artist used stop-motion animation, miniatures, and puppetry to great effect in his earlier works, though when the opportunity to direct his own version of Alice in Wonderland came along, he soon realized that he couldn't do it without leaning heavily on digital wizardry. This means that all the stars of the movie had to do the bulk of their acting in front of green screens. According to visual effects supervisor Ken Ralston, it was a challenge for the whole team. The green screen color, after long periods of time, seems to create a certain aggravation and irritation after staring at it for a long period. It is effective for compositing, but visually and psychologically exhausting to be surrounded by it for extended periods of time. Beauty and the Beast. When Disney first announced their intention to remake a number of their beloved animated classics in live-action format, the title that raised the most eyebrows was Beauty and the Beast. A film in which the majority of the supporting characters are animated household objects was always going to rely on CGI, though director Bill Condon has never liked digital effects and actively avoided using them wherever possible. He told IndieWire, "It was important to make everything that could be real, real. I'm not a big fan of CG movies. The idea is to feel grounded in a world and not be distracted by things that felt like additions." Unfortunately for the actor portraying the Beast, Dan Stevens, It was motion capture all the way, plus some stilts to get him to the right height.
It wasn't easy on stilts.
Steven spoke to both Andy Serkis and Mark Ruffalo about their experiences in motion capture roles, and their feedback left him sweating. He added, "I think I was mildly terrified, but that's really generally what drives a lot of my decisions these days, is calibrating the right amount of terror. Nothing like a Disney movie to get that fear meter up, right?" The Dark Knight. Christopher Nolan is notorious for using real-life effects as much as possible, and most of the big effects in The Dark Knight were done on camera.
The only visual effect involved in that scene was to remove the ram that they had built inside the truck.
But The Dark Knight still offered some unique CG challenges, especially since it was the first film to shoot scenes with IMAX cameras as opposed to using 35mm and converting in post. Visual effects supervisor Nick Davis spoke to Studio Daily about his experience on the Batman flick, saying, "It was important for the visual effects to look as though they were shot on set. Nolan didn't want the film to take on a gimmicky visual effects look." Taking this route meant that Nolan's first sequel to 2005's Batman Begins was a difficult movie to finish, as the visual effects had to be rendered in a higher resolution than ever before. When it came to creating the look for Harvey Two-Face Dent, Nolan wanted to remove layers, not add them. The VFX team had to digitally remove the skin. Two-Face's exposed eyeball had to be painstakingly animated by hand, as were the subtle changes in muscle tension. Gravity. The biggest challenge Alfonso Cuarón faced making his space epic Gravity was achieving a realistic lack of gravity on screen. Pulling it off involved an intricate mixture of practical and digital effects.
There are flares and there are mistakes, as it were, but no mistakes. It's all created.
The director talked to Space about the challenges in getting the effects to look realistic, saying, "It took a lot of education for the animators to fully grasp that the usual laws of cause and effect don't apply. In outer space, there is no up, there is no down." Co-stars Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were advised of their movements by real astronauts before being hooked up to a series of rigs created by Academy Award-winning visual effects artist Neil Corbould. It turns out that Bullock not only had to put up with being suspended from wires most of the day, there were electric shocks to contend with too. Corbould explained, "There was a charge in there like the static you feel underneath an electricity substation. If you walked out then touched someone, you'd get this massive shock." It may not have been easy work for the actors, but it worked out pretty well for Corbould, who won his second Oscar for Gravity. The Matrix. Arguably one of the most influential films of all time, The Matrix truly changed the landscape of action movies, with its memorable fight sequences becoming a benchmark for stunt coordinators and VFX artists alike. The term bullet time was coined for the epic slow-motion shots that the movie employed on the regular, which were created by visual effects guru John Gaeta. Gaeta told the New York Times, "The directors wanted to emulate the stylization found in Japanese animation. When we created weather, fire, and smoke, we wanted it to move not realistically, but impressionistically." Raw footage released as an extra on the DVD showed how bullet time was achieved using an intricate setup of perfectly positioned cameras and masses of green screen. The Lord of the Rings. Whenever Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy comes up, the first thing most people mention is Andy Serkis's brilliant motion capture performance, though creating Gollum was just one of many challenges Weta faced during the movies. Practical solutions like miniature models and forced perspective were used in places, but the bulk of the visual effects were achieved digitally. Even the interior of Bilbo Baggins's Hobbit hole was computer-generated for some shots. Speaking to AWN, visual effects supervisor Jim Riegel revealed that Return of the King was his favorite of the three movies because of the monumental amount of work he and his team put into the picture. He explained, "Return of the King has more shots than 1 and 2 combined. It's like 1,450. It was mind-boggling to figure out logistically how to do them all. It's something you never think you could have done, and you did it, like climbing Mount Everest." Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. Bill Nighy's character Davy Jones made his first appearance in 2006's Dead Man's Chest, although you may not have recognized the actor under all those digital tentacles.
Well, I was once required to be a squid man in a movie. I was an octopus guy, and I was perfectly happy watching that, because what are you going to say? You don't like my squid? Well then, live with it.
Visual effects supervisor John Knoll was able to develop a method that allowed Nighy to be on set with his fellow actors instead of filming separately in front of a green screen, which in turn allowed him to interact more believably and deliver a far more genuine performance. Knoll described the process to EW, saying, "On a soundstage with 25 technicians staring at Bill and nobody to play off of, that quirkiness would have all gotten ironed out. Somebody would say that gesture is too off or too odd. It could have become a real sort of committee effort.
My squid was world class. My squid was an award-winning squid because the 100 men and women who created my squid.
The post-credits scene in Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales opened the door for the return of supernatural Sea Lord Davy Jones, although Nighy had no part in it. In fact, he had no idea his award-winning squid was even in the movie until a taxi driver told him about it. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel, plus check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.